Welcome to the Intentional Health for Women podcast. I'm your host, Garrett GQ Query. This podcast is dedicated to developing intentional health for women. Former 400-pound fat man turned health and fitness professional, specializing in women's health. In this podcast, you will find over a decade of experience in the health and fitness industry, serving women to become their most intentional self through strength training, nutrition, and lifestyle practices. Each week, we will dive into a variety of different topics, ranging from interviews with women leading the way in the health and fitness industry, client case studies throughout the years, myth busting, social media trends, female hormones, gut health, and so much more. We are not normal. We are intentional. Welcome to another episode of the Intentional Health for Women podcast. I'm your host, Garrett GQ Query, and I'm joined today by Rachel Price.
Yes, hello.
Or wait, are you still Bryce?
I'm still Price, but I am Rachel Williams now, so yes.
It's you.
Price is actually my middle name, if you didn't know.
Oh.
Yeah. I branded with it way back when, so.
Fun fact.
Yeah.
So what was your maiden name?
Schatz, actually, it's German, and no one can pronounce it correctly. It ends up being Schatz or Schatz, and no one wants that, so.
Learned something new today.
Yeah.
All right. Because I've known you for a while. Like, when did you win your pro card?
I won my pro card in 2020. Yes. Or no, 2021? Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. In the USA's, it was when COVID was going crazy.
Yeah. Where were you primarily training at that time?
I was training out of Glory Gains.
How did I miss that?
Yeah, I was there the whole time. That was my main gym for many, many years.
Yeah. And now you and Jay are just at Mountainside most of the time?
Most of the time in TG, the gym.
Okay, got you.
Yeah, we really like it there.
Yeah. I was over there for a little bit, but it's way, way over there.
Yeah, it's far out.
Comparatively speaking to like being in North Scottsdale.
Yes, yes.
So we're going to jump right in. Walk me through the moment you step off stage and your world changes forever. Yeah. What was that like?
I love it. So funny thing is I never really had the idea of going pro. Like I really thought that, that'd be cool in the back of my head. I had a really successful season of competing back in 2017. But after that, I actually fell into a little bit of an eating disorder there. And I decided in that moment, like, hey, competing is not for me anymore. And I actually went from 2017 to 2021, still training like a bodybuilder. Yep. But just didn't really have that idea. Now COVID hit and I put on like 15, 20 pounds and I'm like, okay, I got to get this off. I got to have a date. I've got to have a goal because I do really well with pushing myself toward those types of goals. And sure enough, 6 months later, I was like, okay, I'm going to try one time for my pro card because I knew I was going to do a state show. And I was like, if it happens, it happens. Great. If it doesn't, I'll never do another national show. And so then I actually won the overall at the first show that I did in Arizona here. And then 2 weeks later was nationals and got first call outs, was in the center. I couldn't believe it, honestly. I was like, I don't know if I deserve this just because I hadn't been in like the ring for so long. But stepping off the stage, I mean, I think the coolest thing for me personally was feeling my brother's energy because that's really what brought me to bodybuilding in general was just my brother's love for the sport. And so it was kind of like we both won in that moment. And I think it's like anytime that I'm on the stage or stepping off the stage, like I just feel his presence more than anything. So it was just like a really cool feeling because I was like, we did it to my, like just feeling his energy. And just some background, I lost my brother in 2017 due to a drug overdose. So I think that just competing in general just helped me to connect with him. Not only that, but my parents were there and my now husband was there and he'd only known me for like 2.5 weeks at the time and traveled to Arizona to watch me compete. So I was on fire. I mean, it was the best moment, probably one of the best moments of my life, just feeling like all that hard work had come to fruition.
Amazing. Yeah. So yeah, that's actually what I was like referring to. You had, as I was looking through some stuff, like you had mentioned it a few times, is you found out at a competition.
Yeah. The worst moment of my life for sure. I was competing in California at the time. This was in 2017. And my brother was actually supposed to be at that show, and he was going through some hard times. He was actually in and out of rehab at that time. And I knew something was wrong because the night before, and we text back and forth all the time, I sent him a photo of me all tanned. And I was like, it's go time, war paint's on, like so excited for this. And he read it, but didn't respond. And I was like, well, that's weird. And the next morning, like never wished me luck or anything like that. And it was prejudging. I was about to go on, and I was trying to find my parents everywhere. I couldn't find them. And I walked out to the parking lot, and I just saw my dad like hitting the car, and he like fell and collapsed on the ground. And I ran up to him, and I'm like, what's going on? And my mom's like, just go back in. He's having a sinus infection or something. He's sick. He doesn't feel good. And my mom's face just had like full panic on it. And so I got on stage and did the weirdest smile I've ever done because I knew something was really wrong. And right when I got off the stage for prejudging, my parents said, grab your stuff, we're leaving. And I was like, just tell me what's going on. And they're grab your stuff, we're leaving. And I'm like, I don't want to leave here until I know what's going on. And they finally told me. And I just remember like looking down and seeing all of this, like, because they cover the floors because of the tan. And I just saw all this plastic flooring. And so when I think about the moment I lost my brother, I just think about that plastic flooring, which is so weird. But in that moment, it was just like the only thing that I could attach my eyes to that like I could process, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's unfortunately, I have received that phone call in my life. So I can relate. Addiction is often a silent and misunderstood battle. What are the complexities of your brother's like struggle? Like obviously, like to my awareness, like you guys were very close.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the crazy thing about addiction. You know, we were blood siblings, and we just were so completely different in the way that we handled life. Like we would party all the time together. We were in college roommates, and like it'd be Monday morning and I'd be ready to go to school and he'd be chugging alcohol in the kitchen. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's drinking Sailor Jerry's. And so that's what always like, I just realized that we were so inherently different.
Were you twins?
No, 18 months apart.
Okay.
But everyone thought we were twins and we were only one grade apart. Gotcha. So everything he did was a little bit like slower than I did. And I was always really like excelling. So when we moved to college, he was in his technical second year of college, but he hadn't even started yet. So we kind of started both as freshmen when we went off to NAU.
Because you grew up in Cali.
Yes. Yeah. So I think just realizing that he didn't have a choice. I would get angry because I'm like, why is he making these decisions that I would never make? But it dawned on me that it is a serious disease. Like he doesn't have that option like I do, which helped me to really understand the disease in itself, and just knowing that it's so far over our heads as normies. Like we don't really know what it's like to be just chained by a substance like they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. You know, my dad has never been drunk a day in his life. Because he grew up with an alcoholic father. And I'll never forget, it's probably 10 years ago at this point, I grew up in the Midwest. My grandfather, my dad's dad, still lives in Washington State. So it's a 2-hour time difference. And we called him like Christmas Day at like noon, which is 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And he was still hammered from the night before.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like you could tell. Like I worked in the bar industry long enough. Like it's real obvious, real fast.
Yeah.
In the darkest moments of losing your brother, what was like that glimmer of hope that kind of kept you moving forward? Is that really where like the competing came from? Is that what's really like been able to pull you through?
Oh yeah. I mean, competing just had a major part in my ability to cope. just being in the gym and being able to move my body like that and still working toward a goal. I didn't drop out of prep. I actually went back on stage. My family left that day. My parents left, and I just still competed in San Diego. Finished out the show because I'm like, this was be the last thing that my brother would want from me, is to stop in the middle and leave not just because, but in his opinion, probably.
Yeah.
But the glimmer of hope, I'd say, was just holding on to my faith and then having the ability to still go for our goal, because at the end of the day, competing was very much so my brother's goal and his aspirations for me. He always called himself my manager. He was going to manage my future and all of those things. And so, yeah, I think that just having that faith mostly is what I just remember the moment he passed. And I said to my mom, and I don't remember any of this, but she told me that the first words that came out of my mouth were, it's okay, Mom, he's dancing in heaven. He's totally free and he's dancing. But I don't remember saying any of that. And my mom just told me that a few days later and was like, I couldn't believe that came out of your mouth. And I'm like, well, that was just my faith speaking, because I was probably so in shock, but I could feel that energy of him being free.
Yeah.
And that gave me hope.
How did your brother, you guys growing up so close together, was it pretty much like most young men, saw the magazines, was it growing up in Cali, a combination of all of it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, my brother, he was very independent. I think that, but he was also very, very social and so popular. He's who gave me my entire social life. So I think for him, a lot of it had to do with just being, I look at where we live now compared to Orange County, and it's so crazy. Even talk to my husband, who's from Kansas City. He's like, wait, you saw that stuff in high school? And I'm like, oh, 100%. This is how we were partying. This is we were going to hotel, all these things. And so I think my brother was very much so exposed at a young age, but I think his choice of friends was always very poor. It was the renegade kids always. And that's where he felt most at home. And that was his downfall. He never really had good influences around him after the age of 12, 13.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Your brother's words about never giving up are powerful. How do you carry his memory in your daily life, especially in the most challenging moments?
So in my office, I actually have this plaque that says, the greatest gift we can give those who have left us is to live fully in their place. And I smile at that every single day, just knowing that is what he wants for me. And so I am just always trying to put my best effort into everything that I do, knowing that there's an angel on my shoulder in a sense, and that I'm not alone, and I always feel like he is watching out for me. And I've had so many beautiful signs along the way, especially recently, that I just know, he's up there.
Yeah. Have you competed as a pro?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I did a full season in 23, I believe. So it was a little bit over a year ago. And I did 5 pro shows actually in that year, 4 or 5.
Nice. How'd that go?
Oh my gosh. No, I think I like competing in the States a lot better because I did so much better. I'm a natural athlete though. And in IFBB, it's not realistic to be natural. I was very grateful that majority of the shows I was top 10, but I just could not crack that top 5 without running something in a sense. And but it was really fun. It was cool to be with all these women that I've seen for so many years and to be backstage with them. It was very cool, but it's also really hard to not beat yourself up when things don't go as planned, because I'm very competitive by nature.
Yeah. I was fortunate enough to coach a IFBB Pro, one of the youngest titled IFBB pros in history.
Okay.
And kind of same thing. She was genetic mutant to have won at such a young age. Right. But similar experience. Basically, she stepped into the pro league and is just, even as a genetic mutant, just completely untouchable, because it's just such a different level of competition.
Yeah. Oh,
because at that point, you're not just dealing with genetics. you're going against some of the, the best genetics. You're going a bit against some of the best coaches in the industry that like understand how to, manipulate. Like I was having a conversation with my coach and some of the stuff, like I did one-to-one mentorship with him for 2 years. I've dove deep into like physiology and some of the stuff that he has recently gotten into in the last couple of years is like genetic testing and looking at specific snippets of like, what are you like, how to manipulate those things, how to take advantage of certain genetic snippets. And it's like,
cool.
Like we were talking, he was talking and discussing like ways and stuff to basically get more out of less and less and less, and like how to continue to manipulate your genetics in that way. And that's what you're stepping on stage and competing against. And so it's a whole different level of competition. And it takes a lot.
Yeah, I feel like realistically, it takes years of just running it, like learning certain judges and what they prefer and having that relationship with them too. It's huge. And I think that was just something I'm like, it's over my head.
It's also like, we're going to get into it. Like, I know that you are currently, going through some fertility things. And like, that's something that like I look to in the future. And I don't think this is like, I'm actually going to compete for the first and only time in November of this year.
Heck yeah.
I set out that goal for some personal reasons, but I told my coach, I was like, hey, like this is one and done. We're doing 2 back-to-back comps because I understand what it like, even for me is like, I understand what it takes to be competitive at a national level.
Right.
And I'm not willing to do the things to be competitive at a national level because I'll be 35 in June. Right. It's just like, I have other things that I want to go after in life. And that ain't it. Yes. From the depths of the grief in, through the process, right, of earning your IFBB Pro card, which would have been you said 2021. So 4 years after the fact. You stepped away from stage for momentarily, right? Like you made it through that competition season. You used competing as a, outlet to process a lot of that grief. That's not just a physical transformation. What were the internal battles that you were fighting the most that, people couldn't see during that time frame?
Yeah, I think the hard thing about what I went through in that moment is I did end up using competing as an outlet in a not so positive way because I was running from my grief, like physically running from it. My goal was to get to the gym and go so hard on the Stairmaster that no one knew if I was sweating or crying. Like it was a thing that I looked forward to every single day where I would just push myself so hard. And it only lasted so long. It did last a while. It got me all the way through up until about 2019. So about a year and a half. And then I hit what I call the dark night of the soul. And it was so beyond overwhelming to deal with depression and anxiety that I've never experienced before in my life. And I think that's what really just was such a flag for me to get help. And I got the most incredible therapist in the world. And I always say she changed my life the moment I met her. And it was just so important for me to have another outlet to actually release all of this pent up PTSD and trauma from the last few years of dealing with the addiction and the loss itself, that I was just able to find so much better healing within actual inner work instead of just doing the outer work. So that was very important for me.
You and your brother were really close. What was that? What were the last couple of years like leading up to that? Like, did you really get to experience a lot of that firsthand?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So my brother's addiction started very heavily, I'd say, middle of high school. So we had been dealing with that. School explorations. He was always getting arrested for stealing alcohol, just like petty little things that he would always do. But the house revolved around my brother from anytime I can remember, honestly, because he was always in trouble. And I was always like the one trying to stay out of trouble. So that's kind of what made us completely opposite. Was I was the one that could never think of upsetting my parents in a sense, whereas he was just running amok. And so that's what really separated us. But Remind me of the question. What were you?
So you had brought it up is like, kind of like as you were walking through, the original question is just like, not just the physical transformation, but what were some of the internal battles that you were fighting? And you talked about finding your therapist, and something that we didn't really touch on, right, is we touched on like, okay, the moment you lost him, but then it's like, what was...
Yes, okay.
What was going through the addiction leading up to the loss of him?
Okay, yeah. So back to that, I think I try and block it out, to be honest. But so I explained kind of through high school. And then when I was in my senior year of high school and he was in that off year, he actually ended up getting jumped like really bad by a gang. And it was like this whole terrible thing to watch. His face was broken to the point where he didn't look normal for about 3.5 months. So that's when I stepped in as sister protector. No one's ever going to hurt my brother again. That's when we both actually started working out in the gym. So we both like got this crazy fire passion. He would run into my room every morning and be like, "Get up, you're fat, we gotta go." And then she'd be like, "Okay." And we'd jump to the gym every single morning before high school. Yeah. And it was like,
you're fat.
Yeah, literally. Come on, you look so fat laying there. So that was like our fun thing to do. And that was like our outlet together. But through college, I mean, the first semester we lived together, everything went really well. His partying was under control because I was there. And then as soon as I left, he got a DUI actually the week after, because I just left for summer just to go enjoy time at home. And he wanted to stay up there because he gets some freedom without his sister being there, So got another DUI. That was the second at the time. And then that's when he started dealing drugs in Flagstaff. And so when I came back from summer, my house was a literal drug house. And I was like, I cannot live here. There was men just like randomly walking in and out. My bedroom had been like, people had stolen things out of my room, and it was just a whole thing. So I contacted my parents. They actually came up to Flagstaff and they moved me into my own apartment. It was like a little studio because I just didn't feel safe anymore. And I think that's what the moment when I realized like this is so far beyond any of our reach. We can't help this. And at that time he was having seizures just from the drugs that he was taking. So I witnessed many seizures while I was just home and hanging out with him and trying to save his life. And so I was in constant fight or flight during that year of college of just trying to save my brother. If he didn't show up, didn't come back home, I would be up all night sick, worried about him, looking the streets for him. So yeah, it was very tumultuous. And then he actually, 3 weeks after I moved out, he got raided by the feds. And he had 20 years of prison looming over him. So I had to get a lawyer. They wanted to talk to me. They thought I had something to do with it. And thankfully, nothing ever panned out because I had moved out just in the nick of time. But no, he was in big trouble. And he spent like almost, like I think 6 months or more in jail and got his way out of jail. And then after that, the only way he got out of jail was through court-ordered rehab. And he was in court-ordered rehab for like 2.5 years. And those were the best years with my brother because he was finally sober again. But sadly, it was government ordered and it just didn't last. So
when that ended, it just right back.
Within 6 months, he was gone. Yeah. And it just happened so quickly. I mean, he was stone sober and doing his drug testing and his everything he needed to do with his probation. And then he was let off probation and he smoked weed. And then it was drugs again. It was over.
What was that like in like high school for you, being the good kid? Like just given the situation, I can about imagine like you probably shoved away like any needs.
Oh yeah. And my mom, she always is like, "You've always been so perfect." And I know it's not right because you just never had that like spotlight, I guess. But honestly, it created this bit of unhealthy perfectionism that I still deal with for today. It's, what holds me back on a lot of things that I wish to do. And it made me put a lot of pressure on myself that probably didn't need to be so heavy. But, I still had a beautiful childhood. I never, think I never think it was bad for me by any means, but I do think that it was imbalanced in the home for sure. It was tough because they had to put all their energy and effort into saving my brother, but it just wasn't the right way, probably.
Yeah. Do you feel that the experience of the loss that you experienced like shaped your the way that you coach? And
oh yeah, definitely. No, I think it's given me the ability. I actually work with a lot of recovering addicts and alcoholics, and I love that work because I feel like I can see or at least speak to the situation in a way that they really appreciate. But I know that fitness was the one thing that helped my brother to heal from his addiction. So, anytime I do have a client that's dealt with it in the past, I just feel like I can connect in such a different way with them. And just making sure that, we are paying attention to their innermost needs as addicts, like making sure they're never getting too hungry, never too tired. That's when they end up relapsing and making those mistakes. So I think it's given me the ability to help people more than I ever thought I could as a normie.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, something that was told to me a long time ago is our mess is our message. And I think it's like a lot of times like we can get caught up and outside looking in, look at other people's lives and they're like, and we can be like, oh, like they have it so good. And you never, and that's where I think that one massive like value of social media, while there's plenty of negatives, it can be such a massive value is like when people genuinely share like their mess and their story and where they came from. It gives people a lot of hope of like, oh, like they're just normal people, just like me.
Right.
That just have refused to quit. Battling infertility, in this, you've gone through a couple seasons since then, right? Like you won your pro card. You said you met Jay.
Yes.
He was there
yes.
2.5 weeks in, and you've slowly but surely been like building your relationship with him. You got married.
March of last year.
March of
24.
Okay.
So coming up on a year.
Exciting.
Yes.
Exciting.
Yes.
What's going on? Where are we at with that?
Yeah. Many identity shifts in the last few years, for sure. I mean, I was a single competitor girl. Then, got in my relationship with Jay. I stopped competing, and that was a major shift that I had to deal with. And then, obviously stepping into the feet of a married woman, and then hopefully, or in the shoes, and hopefully a mother soon. So that is our current journey right now. My husband actually, he went through testicular cancer back in 2016. Yeah. So we knew that our fertility journey was going to be a lot different, a lot more difficult than, normal people. And so we had a good idea of what it was going to look like. We wanted to try everything naturally first, but recently made the decision to go with IVF. And now we're pretty far deep into it. We're almost to the finish line here. So we're excited, and hopefully it'll take and everything works out on that.
Walk us through that journey. What is that? Like, what does that look like? Because like, what do you mean by the finish line?
Yes. So with what we were doing before, so I'll just kind of take you through the leading up to IVF. So my husband, he has had to be on TRT, just testosterone therapy, because he only has one producing. They took one away. And so he's only working with like half the normal. And so we kept having him retested. He got on Clomid, HCG, whatever we could do to get his levels up. And after speaking with doctors, they were like, we just realistically don't think he's going to be able to get to the place he needs to get to do this naturally, even with IUI, which is another option other than IVF. So after going to the drawing board, we decided that IVF was the way to go, just because with chemo too, the DNA can fracture on the men's side. And I think like 80% of female miscarriages are due to DNA, just not, or genetic issues happening. And so we realized like, okay, we could get pregnant potentially, but are we going to keep the baby? And so the safest way to go about it was he, thankfully, in 2016, before going through chemotherapy, he stored. So we had cryo storage. And so we started the IVF process. So pretty much what that looks like is the first part is called the stim cycle. And so we are stimulating my ovaries to not just drop one egg, but drop potentially like up to 30 or 40 eggs at once. So the normal female ovary is the size of a grape. And by the end of the stim cycle, it's the size of like a softball or a grapefruit. So it was a tricky process because it's injections in the stomach every single day. I've never personally given myself injections, still haven't. My husband did them all because I just like refuse. Makes me nauseated. I think the hardest part going through the stim cycle was the ups and downs of my hormones, my emotions. I looked on all my testing and my estrogen, normal estrogen for women is between like 200 and 600. I was at like 4,700. So I was like, okay, no wonder I'm losing my mind here. But thankfully the retrieval, so after you go through the stim cycle, you grow all the eggs. They do something called a trigger shot where it triggers the ovulation and then those eggs should be mature. So we went through, we got 33 eggs. Of those 33, only 14 were mature, which is a little less than normal. And then we had 12 fertilized on that 24-hour mark, which was exciting. Of those 12, they sent out 7 embryos for genetic testing. And of those 7, we ended up with 5. So we are super excited because I want 4 kids. He wants 3, maybe 4. So they do say for IVF, though, that you should ideally have 2 embryos per child that you want. So more than likely, we will have to do another stim cycle down the road. But for right now, for starting with our first kid, we are A-okay to move forward with what we currently have. And then probably after the first baby, we will go and grab some more eggs.
Very exciting. So to kind of circle back, this is a field of relative expertise for me, not so much the IVF side of things. But I've been fortunate enough to help 10 women achieve pregnancy naturally. Hey. Obviously, given your specific journey with your husband and like one testy, going through chemotherapy, and then being on TRT, to put that in perspective for the audience, like, testosterone replacement therapy is essentially shutting down your function in your body, right? For some men, it's still possible, like testosterone replacement therapy, let's get this very clear, is not birth control. Because I know plenty of people who have had children while on TRT. And so but there is a stack of cards on Jay's side, right? Of one testy, chemotherapy, potential genetic fracturing, right? Like as far as like the DNA. So a lot of things going on there. And those therapies, even for Jay, like Clomid, HCG, a lot of people aren't aware of this. Those are actually like female fertility hormones.
They are. It's like a female pregnancy hormone.
Yeah. Or it can make men, it can be very challenging on men as well. Like as far as like what you would go through, like mentally and emotionally. I'm sure you experienced that firsthand.
And that was honestly the major reason we chose to go through IVF, because I just sat back and I'm like, realistically, is my husband going to be able to go through this 4 times? Like when we want to get pregnant every time and just hope for the best? Like it just seemed absolutely crazy, because you're right. I mean, I've known him for 4 years. He has never been so low and just feeling absolutely terrible from the inside out. Like I know that man and he fires on all cylinders and he's always stoic, and he was not stoic. He was just like going through it. His energy was so poor. And like what they say is like, it literally feels like death. Like someone explained it to me. They're like, it just feels like you're dying. Like it just feels like you're not a man anymore. And so I just, obviously that's going to affect everything. It's going to affect our ability to, do all the things that it takes to make a baby. So, we just took a look at it, and it's like, it's not it's not realistic to put that pressure on him as well, especially when we do have that option with that cryo stored.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. Yes.
Right. It's amazing that that's available.
It's crazy.
That's incredible because he's a pro too. When did he win his pro card?
He got his, I think, a year before he met me. So in 2020, like in the real thick of COVID is when he got his. Yes.
Interesting.
But he had tried like for many years to get his pro card. He actually had his natural bodybuilding pro card first. And then obviously since he was, had to use TRT, he couldn't compete in naturals anymore. And that's when he went with the IFBB.
Cool. Amazing. What does like hope? So, I mean, we've kind of walked through this already. It sounds very promising, but obviously nothing is guaranteed. I think we've all heard stories over the years of, multiple IVF attempts, other things like that. What is some of the ways that you and Jay have kept hope in this season as you've, started to go through this journey?
Yeah. I mean, I always fall back on faith. Like at the end of the day, I think both of us stand so firm in our knowing that God will give us children because we know we'd be just amazing parents and we know it's our life calling. So I think that gives us peace. But obviously there is a lot of fear. It's only about 70% of implantations for pregnancy that actually pan out to a live birth. And so, you have that 30% chance of it not working. And you hear stories, like you said, of just women that have tried, over and over and over again. And so it obviously is very scary. Thankfully, everything is healthy on my end. So I think that is helping us in a sense, but nothing is promised. So I think just knowing that if things don't work out the way I want them to, because I've played it out both ways in my head. And I think that just knowing that I can fall back on my faith in those toughest moments, just like I did when I was grieving, is just the one thing I can hold on to.
Faith is good. If you could speak to your brother right now, what would you want him to know about the impact that he's had on your life?
I would want my brother to know that even though things were so crazy when he's here, he was so loved and he made such a beautiful impact on so many people's lives. And I think that was the really cool thing about him having those 2.5 years of sobriety, or 3 years before he did pass, was he impacted so many men that needed help. He was actually running a sober living home for a while. He was the manager there. And many of those men in his sober living home actually spoke at his funeral. And you just realize the impact that he left on their lives. But I mean, the impact on my life is just so beyond my ability to even comprehend, because he's kind of like in every little decision that I make. And I feel like, just like I explained before, he shows up in little ways. My husband, the day of my egg retrieval, my husband was walking, and I always say that my brother is a hummingbird, and he's a blue hummingbird. It's very specific because he's so fast and he's always just doing all the things. And so my husband said, and we used to see a lot of hummingbirds at our last house that we lived in, but we moved and we haven't really seen many. He said one flew right in front of his face in our backyard and stood there for like 30 seconds and then flew away. So he was like, on the way to the appointment, he's like, your brother's with us today. And I'm like, well, that's cool. And then as soon as we walk into the pre-op room, there's this beautiful mural of a blue hummingbird. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's just such a beautiful sign. So I feel like he shows up in ways just when I need it the most. And the impact is just beyond knowing that because of his life, I feel like I can heal these family curses in a sense. And I can just at least have a good idea of, because I know that these diseases are family diseases. It doesn't just affect one person. Like, this is in our bloodline, and it's far in our bloodline as well. And so just me being able to learn so much through him is going to set my future family up for hopefully success.
Absolutely. It's funny that you say that. So my mom loved monarchs, and me and my sister say the same thing. And living here in Arizona, you don't really see a whole lot. Like, they do exist.
Yeah,
I've seen them.
Yes.
Or at least a cousin. I don't know if it's actually a monarch because they look a little bit different, but very similar. And so once in a blue moon, I get to see them, and it's like, we'll randomly text each other and be like, hey, saw mom today.
Oh, I love that.
So, yeah, I get the hummingbird thing for sure. How has your faith sustained you through losing your brother, pursuing those professional dreams, and now like navigating these challenges in fertility? Like we kind of touched on it a little bit, but obviously that's, I feel like almost like multifactorial of like, leaning on faith in all of those seasons, which can get really hard. Like one question I really love to ask a lot is, how do you lean on faith in good times? But obviously faith is huge in those bad times as well.
Yeah. I think that allowing my daily, like every single morning, I'm in the Word. And I think that sets up my day just to be present and focused and in close communication with the Lord. I think that being an entrepreneur is testing every single day. And it's scary. Like nothing's promised, And so being able to have that time in the morning to lean on the Lord and just get my mind right before going through all the things that I want to do in a day, it just helps me to not put so much pressure on myself, because I know that as long as I'm making steps while communicating with the Lord, then I know that He's going to make my path straight. And I think that goes with every part, especially fertility, because there is so many unknowns and there's so much waiting. And I think that the Lord really tests us in those waiting times. And it's like, are you really going to have your faith right now? Are you really going to? And there's been times that my husband's like, babe, you always have so much faith. Why don't you have faith right now? And I'm like, oh my goodness, it's spiritual warfare. The devil's tempting me. He's trying to like put me down this negative spiral. And so I think that just constantly reframing and praying and just taking a step back has really allowed me to deal with those tough times of waiting and also grieving.
Yeah. Is there any conversation that you wish that you could have with your brother?
I think in the first few years of his passing, before I was able to really process it, one of those stages of grief is anger. So I think one of the questions I would have asked him before was like, why? Like, how did this happen type thing? But I think now today, I'd rather just have like a conversation with him than ask him anything. I'd rather just hug him and tell him how much I miss him. But I think I held a lot of anger before because I couldn't understand why he would do that to us. Like it was a choice, but it wasn't a choice, Nope. He wanted to be here.
Yep. Yeah. It's an interesting dichotomy.
Yeah.
That we go through.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, it's done.
Yeah, I know.
It's done.
I know.
So thank you for sharing. It's wild. Did he compete when during those years?
Yeah, so he competed. His first show was in 2015, actually, and that was 2 years before my first show. So I was still in college, and I knew that I couldn't compete yet just because of all the obligations that I had at school and whatnot. But we went down to his first show. It was actually here in Mesa. Mm-hmm. And I was going to school at NAU. He had moved down to Prescott to go to rehab. And that's where he got locked in with this amazing bodybuilding gym down there. And so he dove in. He did 2 shows, one in Mesa and one in Gilbert or something.
What gym in Prescott?
It's a garage gym. And this woman, Nancy, she's incredible. She's like 70 something and competing still today.
Crazy.
Oh yeah. He set me up with Nancy and she was helping me with posing in the very beginning. So it was really cool. Like they had a whole little garage gym. I can't remember the name. I'll have to think of it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did he compete during the years that he was sober?
Yes. That was his outlet. Was when he was sober. And the sad thing is like, honestly, for him, the gym and competing turned into like another drug in a sense, the ability to push yourself to the absolute
limits.
Yeah. So he didn't do it like healthy. Yeah. He was just like cutting corners in the end. And like sometimes I would watch him work out and I'm like, does he want to die? Like he just works out with such like an extreme like energy, So it was intense. But it was a great outlet for him. It was just, he always went so far on the pendulum with whatever he did choose.
Right.
Yeah.
So everyone gets asked this question at the end of an episode. How are you living intentionally as we navigate this next season of your life?
Yeah, I think living with intention for me, especially in this next season, is slowing down, honestly, and staying present. I think especially something I've noticed, like just with going through IVF, is like I'm always waiting for the next thing. I'm always waiting for the next doctor's report or test result or whatever that is. But like in trying to like push past this current season, which I think is flawed in every way, because this is like the last time that I'm going to be without a little one that I'll be caring for the rest of their lives, And I think it's a beautiful time for my husband and I to be soaking in before becoming parents. And I think just, being intentional is also being present and just allowing each time to have its own season without trying to push to the next season so quickly. And that's been a major learning lesson for me.
I think all business owners can relate with that.
Yeah. Lots of meditation. Like I am slowing down my mind. I am trying to just become as aware of what comes in as much as possible. So that way I can filter and keep my brain clear. Yeah. There's a lot going on up there.
Totally. Where can we find you?
Instagram is where I am usually. Just Rachel with 2 L's _Price. I am hoping to start YouTube soon with the new family and share our IVF journey. Yeah. So hopefully there soon too.
Okay. Very cool. And well, thank you so much for coming.
Yes. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
If this episode brought you value, please subscribe, share with a friend, and leave us a review. We are not normal. We are intentional.